There are days when the world speaks too loudly, when even the softest noise feels like a crowd in the room. You close the door, you turn off the screen, and there is that other kind of noise, the quiet that rushes in like water. It can feel heavier than sound, a kind of space you don't know how to fill. You may think, why does silence feel so empty when I'm supposed to find God in it? I've asked that question more than once. I've sat on the edge of a bed in the late hours, when the lamp is off and the house is asleep, and felt the ache of questions that don't resolve. I've carried the weight of choices that won't answer back. I've known what it means to pray without hearing anything in return. And I've learned, slowly, that God's quiet has its own language, one that doesn't flatter impatience, but does tend to build people who can walk a long time without breaking. Some of us were taught to expect that the voice of God always sounds like a burst of clarity, sudden, strong, unmistakable. Sometimes it does, but often the truth is much simpler and much slower. God teaches by quieting the room, the way a good teacher lowers their voice so the class has to lean in. God teaches by saying less, not to punish us, but to draw out of us what noisy answers would never reveal. If silence feels confusing to you, you are not strange or faithless. You are human. Most of us live with so many inputs that when they stop, we mistake the lack of sound for the lack of presence. We assume that if God isn't speaking loudly, he isn't speaking at all. But that's not the way Scripture describes him. When Elijah expected God in the wind, the earthquake, and the fire, he found him in a gentle whisper. That little phrase has steadied me more than once. A whisper asks us to come closer. It assumes nearness. It doesn't need a microphone because the face is near the ear. Silence isn't God withholding from you. Silence is God pruning the excess so you can discern the real from the loud. I didn't always believe that. There was a season in my life when I was trying to get an answer about a direction that mattered to me. Work, calling, the shape of my days. I read. I asked. I prayed. I thought if I stacked enough verses together, if I convinced myself of the right thing, the quiet would break open into a clear sentence I could write down. It didn't. Instead, days kept passing, small and unremarkable. I went to work. I made simple meals. I returned messages. I tried to be present with the people I loved, and the silence continued. It annoyed me. Then it agitated me. Then, eventually, it humbled me. When I ran out of impatience, a different kind of listening began. Not because I became more spiritual, but because I was too tired to perform. One evening I took a slow drive with no music. I heard the tires on the road. I heard my breath. I noticed tension in my shoulders I hadn't realized I carried. A thought came, not a command, not a thunderclap, just a small awareness. The noise didn't just live around me, it lived inside me. Even if God had spoken loudly in that moment, there would have been no room for his words to land. The quiet wasn't empty. It was revealing the crowd inside me, the competing impulses that wanted quick answers more than true guidance. The silence wasn't punishment. It was an invitation to live more honestly with God. There's a strange mercy in God's quiet. It turns down the volume on every lesser voice until you notice which ones were steering you without your consent. It isn't comfortable. Silence exposes. It shows you the bargaining in your prayers, the fear in your timing, the subtle ways you are trying to impress a God who has never asked for a performance. It shows you how badly you want a life without risk, and how gently God keeps refusing to give you one. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he loves you too much to let you grow shallow. If you've ever felt ashamed for not hearing God like other people seem to, let me sit with you in that for a moment. Many of us have carried the quiet like a secret failure. We scroll past testimonies of instant direction and feel small in comparison. We nod along when people say, "I just knew," and we wonder why we didn't. I have learned not to rush those feelings away. What looks like slow faith is often very faithful. What looks like uncertainty can be deep courage, the kind that stays with God when God stays with the pause. In Scripture, stillness is not a void. Be still and know that I am God, the psalmist writes. The stillness comes before the knowing, as if there are truths of God that only reveal themselves after the noise settles. The stillness is the classroom. The knowing is the lesson. And the silence in between is not empty, it is dense with presence. Here's a reframe that has helped me. Silence is not the absence of guidance. It is the sharpening of discernment. In noise, we can't tell the difference between impulse and leading. In quiet, the edges of those things become clearer. Impulse pushes, leading draws, impulse rushes, leading waits for the next step to appear. Impulse sells you the illusion of control. Leading invites you into trust. When God whispers, He's not being coy. He is cultivating a different kind of person in you, the kind who can tell the difference between the voice that flatters your fear and the voice that holds your hand through fear, without removing it. I think of Jesus slipping away to lonely places to pray. He had crowds and needs at every turn, yet he often chose silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had someone to be with. If the sun needed quiet, we probably do too. But here's the part we don't talk about as much. Sometimes when you slip away, you will not feel spiritual. You will not feel brilliant. You will sit and notice how fidgety you are. You will think about your grocery list. You will remember a conversation you wish you handled differently. And somewhere in the middle of that ordinary mental noise, a deeper quiet arrives, not the silence you make, but the silence that is given to you. It is a kind of homecoming. If you expect silence to give you a headline, you'll grow impatient. But if you expect silence to give you sight, you'll learn to wait. Clarity often rises the way morning does, not in a switch, but in a slow brightening. We notice shapes, then colors, then the softness of the day. The world doesn't snap into place. It comes forward. So does guidance. There's a phrase in Isaiah that has steadied me in these quiet seasons. In quietness and trust is your strength. Not in quick resolutions. Not in perfect certainty. Strength is found in the pairing of quietness with trust, two things we often keep separate. We either try to quiet ourselves without trusting, which leads to numbness, or we try to trust without quiet, which leads to frantic action. But together, quiet and trust become a room where God's presence is felt in the way a safe hand on your shoulder is felt, no words needed for it to be real. It takes time to stop reading silence as rejection. Many of us learned in childhood that silence meant disapproval. A parent sulked. A crowd looked away. We carried that meaning forward into our adult relationship with God. We think, He's not speaking because I did something wrong. Sometimes conviction does speak loud in the silence, but conviction is not condemnation, and God's restraint is not resentment. There is a difference between the quiet of rejection and the quiet of respect. God's quiet is respect. He respects you enough to teach you at a pace you can bear. He respects the limits of your nervous system. He respects the process of pruning. If He shouted over every fear, you'd trust volume, not presence. One of the hard parts about silence is the way it reveals our appetite for control. Waiting exposes what we do with uncertainty. Some of us scramble to fill it with plans. Others numb it with distraction. Others pretend not to care. None of these are moral failures. They are human strategies to survive ambiguity. But they don't lead us where we want to go. In the long view, God's quiet slowly replaces our need to manage with a willingness to be led. It's not passive. It's not careless. It is a surrendered attention, the kind that notices small doors opening one at a time and doesn't demand a map for the whole journey. There is another reframe worth holding. Silence is not inactivity. Think about seeds. The soil looks uneventful. You could stare at a field for hours and think nothing is happening. Underground, though, roots are finding water, the hard shell is yielding, and life is rearranging itself into a form that can break through. Jesus once said that the kingdom of God grows like that. The farmer sleeps and rises, and the seed sprouts and grows how? He does not know. The quiet is not waste. It is work you cannot quantify. You are being rearranged in ways that will make sense later. When I look back at the quietest seasons in my life, I see small shifts that saved me from bigger mistakes. In one season, silence kept me from saying yes to a role I wanted for the wrong reasons. In another, silence taught me to carry loneliness without filling it with people who were not meant to hold me. In yet another, silence taught me to let a relationship end with dignity instead of clinging out of fear. None of these moments felt heroic. They felt like sitting in a room by myself and letting the waves of uncertainty wash over me without escaping. And in that sitting, a kind of backbone formed, not stubbornness, but steadiness. You might wonder, what is God accomplishing in all this that words could not? Quiet removes distraction, yes, but it also refines desire. In noise, we want endlessly and without distinction. In quiet, our wants begin to separate. The hungry ones, the fearful ones, the ones that are actually longings for God with different names, they start to show themselves. We discover that some of what we prayed for was not what we truly wanted. It was what we thought would protect us from pain. Quiet also untangles the expectations others put on us, the scripts we inherited about how life is supposed to go, the subtle pressure to prove that we are spiritually on track. Silence drops those scripts to the floor and asks, gently now, who are you when you are not performing? Who are you with me? Psalm 131 speaks of a soul calmed and quieted like a weaned child with its mother. It is not the quiet of an infant who cries to be soothed, but the quiet of someone who sits without needing to be fed every moment. That image is not scolding. It is tenderness. It says maturity with God looks like being able to be with Him without constant proof of His affection. The affection is already there. You've tasted it enough to rest. Sometimes people ask, how do I know if the silence is God or just nothing? I can't give you a formula, but I can tell you what I've noticed. The silence of God has weight to it. It has kindness. It is not cold, even if it is not chatty. It does not tease you. It does not make you feel small. If anything, you feel more yourself in it, even if that self is trembling a little. The silence of God gives you room to breathe. It does not push. It does not demand a quick decision. It holds you steady long enough for impatience to lose its power. And then, when it's time, the next small step appears not with fireworks, but with peace. The peace is often the sign. There is also the matter of timing. We often treat time as an enemy, the gap between us and what we want. But the God who is not hurried uses time as a tool. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord, says Lamentations. Good, not just necessary, not just unavoidable. Good. There is goodness that only grows in the soil of waiting. Gentle patience with yourself. Compassion for others whose answers are not quick. A habit of noticing the contours of your life as it is, not just as you want it to be. These are not small goods. They are the kind of goods that make you trustworthy, not just successful. I think sometimes God's quiet is also His protection. If He spoke loudly every time we asked, we might run ahead with half of what we needed, mistaking information for wisdom. Silence slows us to a speed where formation can keep pace with direction. You are not just being pointed. You are being shaped. The old words for this were slow and simple. Walk with God. That's all. Not sprint, not strategize. Walk. Sometimes in daylight, sometimes in fog, often in the ordinary hum of dishes and drives and phone calls. God is not a project manager. He is a shepherd. My sheep hear my voice, Jesus said. Sheep do not learn the voice in a day. They learn by long familiarity, by walking the same hills behind the same shepherd, by hearing Him call in countless small ways. In the quiet, that familiarity grows. Let me tell you a small story. Years ago, during a particularly silent stretch, I found myself sitting by a creek behind a friend's house. I didn't go there to have a moment with God. I went there because I needed air. The current was small but steady. And the trees did that thing trees do move with a language only they understand. I sat for an hour. Nothing dramatic happened. But I remember going home with a sentence in my chest. Move like water today. Don't force. Just flow where there's room. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a strategy. It was an image. And it turned out to be enough. A meeting I had been anxious about took a different tone because I wasn't trying to push. A decision I had been holding too tightly loosened. I didn't hear God speak words at the creek, but I learned His manner. He was slower, steadier, kinder than my fear. Sometimes that's what silence reveals, the way of God, not just the words of God. I want to name something that goes unspoken in many of our conversations about prayer. Obedience can feel more isolating in silence. When you are trying to live faithfully and the affirming voice is quiet, You can feel like you're wandering. People may not understand why you're not choosing the sensible path. You cannot justify yourself with a dramatic story. In those moments, remember the longer story you belong to. Many faithful men and women walked by light they could not always see but trusted because they had known the one who gives it. Abraham walked without a map. Mary said yes without an outline. There is a dignity in the quiet yes that no applause can give. You may feel alone, but you are standing in a long line. If you find yourself asking, "Why is this happening now? Why this prolonged pause?" I won't give you a pat answer. But consider this. God might be moving you from a life driven by noise to a life guided by clarity. Clarity is not the same as certainty. Certainty wants to control the outcome. Clarity knows the next right step and leaves the rest with God. Certainty can be noisy. It argues, insists, defends itself. Clarity is quiet. It holds a posture, not a script. Silence winnows. It makes your yes cleaner and your no kinder. There is a small practice that happens almost without our consent when we spend time in God's quiet. We begin to carry our questions longer without trying to anesthetize them. That endurance is a kind of inner healing, not the flashy kind people write about, but the durable kind that lets you stay present to your life. The heart that can hold questions without panicking is a heart that can love in real time, because love is mostly presence, and presence is mostly attention, and attention needs quiet. This is not a lesson you learn overnight. It is a capacity that grows like muscles slowly, with repetition, often through the discomfort of feeling weak before you feel strong. Another thing I've noticed in the quiet, the beginnings of gratitude creep in through small cracks. Not the loud gratitude that makes lists to earn something from God, but the kind that surprises you when you're washing a dish and notice the warmth of the water. The kind that catches you in a hallway when a child laughs. Gratitude arrives sideways in silence. It doesn't announce itself. It just sits beside you and reminds you that life is still allowed to be tender, even when not everything is solved. When I read, "Be still and know," I used to imagine the stillness as a precondition to knowing, as if once I achieved perfect inner quiet, the knowing would appear, fully formed. These days, I think the stillness and the knowing hold hands while they walk. A little stillness, a little knowing. Some days, more stillness, less knowing. Some days, the other way around. No day wasted. You may be in a season where your prayers feel like they dissolve in the air, not because you don't believe, but because they don't come back with an echo. Keep company with God anyway. I don't mean force yourself into a performance of devotion. I mean what the old writers called remaining. God remains with you. You can remain with Him. Set the bar lower than your pride wants. Sit. Breathe. Bring what is true. If words do not come, let your presence be your prayer. The Lord is in His holy temple. Let the earth be silent before Him. That is not a threat. It is a description of safety. You do not need to fill the room because God already does. Some folks worry that if they accept silence, they will get stuck in it forever, that they need to shake God awake somehow. You do not have to. God is not asleep. He is patient. He teaches slowly because He is building you for a long road, and that takes time. You are not behind. You are not less loved because your path includes long stretches of quiet. In fact, those stretches often reveal a closeness that louder seasons cannot. The way two old friends can sit for hours without talking and still walk away more connected than when they arrived. There is an old image the church has leaned on for centuries, the dark night that prepares the dawn. The night is not a punishment, and the dawn is not a prize you earn by surviving. They are both parts of the day. In some of our prayer lives, God takes us through nights so our eyes adjust to a different kind of light. Too much bright at once can blind you. The slow morning protects you. In time, you'll find yourself noticing guidance that was always there, a verse that holds new weight, a conversation that steadies, a persistent sense that it's okay to let something end or begin. Pruning is another image worth holding. The tree does not lose branches because it is bad. It loses them so that more life can flow where it's needed. The cut is a kind of silence. It feels like loss, but it's a space making for growth. God is not angry at you when He prunes. He is making room. If it feels like something is being taken from you without a clear replacement, consider that growth often happens in the empty spaces first. The branches will come later. The roots are busy now. There may come a day when you realize that the silence you resented has become the safest place you know with God. You'll find yourself turning down the radio, not because you're being rigid, but because you miss the gentle company of the one who knows you. You'll find yourself pausing before you answer because the silence has taught you to listen for the difference between anxiety and wisdom. You'll discover that you no longer need the room to approve before you trust the next small step. You'll have become, in that quiet way saints always have, someone who walks with God instead of trying to prove something to him. If all of this feels far from where you are today, that's okay. You are not being graded. There is no clock. There is only God's patient hand, steady and present, whether you feel it or not. What you can't see right now is the work happening beneath the surface, the way roots find the water, the way your soul learns to breathe without props. When the time is right, guidance will emerge not as a sudden rescue from your confusion, but as a clear line through it. You will look back and say, "It wasn't empty. It was full. I was being taught how to recognize the whisper." I want to end with a few simple reminders that have held me in quiet seasons. God's silence is never God's absence. It's a different way of being near. The quiet is not empty. It is fertilized ground. Things grow there you cannot see yet. Discernment sharpens slowly. Don't despise repetition. Familiarity builds trust. The peace that accompanies a small step is often more trustworthy than the pressure that demands a big leap. Your worth is not measured by how quickly you hear. It is held by the one who calls you his own, whether you feel certain or not. And perhaps one more. It is good to wait quietly, not merely necessary good. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Those words do not romanticize suffering. They dignify it. They tell us that something holy happens in the waiting that could not happen otherwise. You are not wasting time. You are being made whole in a way that rush would ruin. Friend, if you're walking through a silent season, I'm sitting with you in it now in spirit. I have no interest in forcing a miracle into your timeline or pretending that quiet doesn't hurt. But I do believe, because I've seen it over years, that the God who whispers is teaching you to hear him, not despite the silence, but through it. You are not alone in the pause. You are not forgotten in the blank space. Your shepherd knows your pace, and he is not in a hurry. If these reflections help you walk your faith more gently, you're welcome to stay and listen to other messages here at Faith in Practice. As you turn toward the rest of your day or your night, may your heart find the settledness that doesn't depend on answers. May you become familiar with the weight of God's quiet, the kind that calms your breathing and loosens your jaw and makes you brave in the uncomplicated ways that matter. May you receive the silence not as a test to pass, but as a presence to keep company with. And may you discover, in time, that clarity does rise, like morning does, enough light for the next step, then the next, until you are walking without fear, guided by a voice you now know by heart.